This is Behind the Mic by Kirkus Reviews, where the subjects are audiobooks and the actors who narrate them. I'm Joe Reed, and with me, contributor Stephen Cummings. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Joe. Great to be back.
It's great to have you back. So, share the books you're going to talk about.
Absolutely. So we have 3 books here. I am going to tell you that these 3 books that I'm bringing to our discussion today happen to be ones that when I started them, I wasn't sure exactly where they're going to go. That's not atypical for any experience, but these took me by surprise. I finished all these really enjoying them. And they are. The first one is The Aviator and the Showman, written by Laurie Gwen Shapiro. This one's narrated by Stephanie Powers. The second one is Sheepdogs. This is written by Elliot Ackerman, narrated by Chris Andrew Shula. And then the third one is Hologram Boyfriends, written and narrated by Mike Albo.
All right, so we'll begin with The Aviator and the Showman, narrated by Stephanie Powers. And we should say Stephanie Powers is the actress who we know from 1970s television.
I didn't make this connection, which should have been obvious as a child of the 70s who watched a lot of Heart to Heart from the 70s. I listened to this entire book and wow, she is fabulous. She really sold this to me. And I was just riveted. I'll explain why in just a moment. And then I looked it up and made the connection. This is Stephanie Powers. Of course it's going to be good.
Now, Laurie Gwen Shapiro really delves into this in a lot of detail.
That was the spirit of this particular audiobook. And I will share too that I think most of us, me included, recognize and know the broad strokes of Amelia Earhart. Like we know that she disappeared, that she was a pioneering pilot. But unfortunately for me, that's where it kind of left off. And I didn't really have a bigger picture. And I think that's what motivated the author to take on this project. This sort of gets into sort of a lot of details that I certainly didn't know. For example, look, Amelia Earhart, she took flying lessons, but she was not a pilot at the start. She was actually working as a social worker, somehow connected to flying and fell in love with it. The other character, and this is the referenced in the title of the book, she's the showman, is George Putnam. And he was known at the time, we're talking about the early 1920s. He had an instinct for a sensation. He was a publisher, a raconteur, whatever word comes to mind that describes this type of personality. He's looking for subject matter that's going to sell books.
Yeah, and he's very questionable. I mean, I knew he was questionable. That was not news to me. How questionable he was, that I really learned through this book. And I also had no idea Amelia Earhart had been a social worker.
I didn't either.
That was really news to me.
That was fascinating.
I thought the book was fascinating, but I also thought it really can get bogged down in tangents. I mean, I get George's wife had an affair, but we don't need all the details about her affair. I mean, I don't see what that added to this as an example, for example.
Yeah, I listened to that, and I will say that for me, again, the relationships of it all and knowing what time of the of history we're in, maybe that's interesting to you. I found that to be a little more, for me, kind of a learning experience. I didn't know, I should say I didn't know much about Putnam, so I found this to be educational from that perspective. And I certainly didn't know about the relationship. So I'm coming at this from somebody who really needed to know the story. And I appreciated those details. It is longer. This book goes on for, I think, over 20 hours. So it is a longer book. Prepare yourself. But at the same time, when the book gets into her flights and the way that we're in the air with her, even though we know the broad strokes that she accomplishes a lot of great things, this is to credit both the author and Stephanie Powers' presentation of it all, because she really takes you there. And I found myself thinking, are they going to make it? Is she going to make it to the next checkpoint? Well, of course she is. But
I know, but I felt the same way when I was listening. It was like, okay, so what?
What's going to happen?
Even though, I mean, obviously it wasn't the last flight. I knew what was going to happen.
Exactly. And this book does shed light on why perhaps the last flight was the last flight. And that's something I also felt was very helpful. Again, we know she disappeared. What were the reasons why? This book really sheds some more light into that, and I really appreciated that as well.
Well, why don't we listen to Stephanie Powers narrate this? Do you need to set this up?
A little bit, just because the clip we were given is more about the George Putnam of it all. We get to hear his background, but you really hear the way Stephanie Powers approaches it.
Okay, this is The Aviator and the Showman by Laurie Gwen Shapiro, narrated by Stephanie Powers.
The George Palmer Putnam of the Jazz Age may have been the flashiest Putnam, but he was only the latest in a long, winding road of famous Putnams. He wasn't the first George, or even the first George Palmer Putnam. In 1887, he entered the world as a son of the second heir to the family's publishing empire. And all Putnam males were expected to contribute to keeping the empire strong.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is perfectly fine, but I don't think it does Powers' narration real justice, because at her best, boy, does she give a sense of being in that plane and really knows how to tell that story.
It makes it kind of epic. So again, with the length of the
Yeah.
book and the things you go through, when you finally get into those cockpit moments with Amelia Earhart, it really sells the book, and that's why I'm recommending it today.
Amelia Earhart is such a compelling figure.
Absolutely.
Still, and to me, the way she looks, which the book really goes into, is a crafted look, to have her look like Charles Lindbergh, even though her resemblance really was always there.
Right.
Even in her pictures, there's something that just flies off those images that makes her feel so vibrant.
And listening to this book too, it really takes you into the time.
Yeah.
Because of the way that they, again, this is going back to the George Putnam of it. And also just how do you sell to the public or bring to the public the image of Amelia Earhart at that time. And so those moments when we're outside of the plane and we're on the ground and they're projecting this image of her, I found those things to be interesting as well, just from that historical perspective.
Yeah, and Laurie Gwen Shapiro, one of her previous books is The Stowaway, that was set in 1928. So I think it's a period she's done research on, and I feel like she really knows pretty well.
And the research is definitely clear here too, which I'm grateful for that. I really appreciate it. Yes, there's a lot of detail here. Yes, it takes a while, but sometimes you just got to have that bigger book experience. This is one that I would recommend.
And Sheepdogs. Now, this is a very unusual book by Elliot Ackerman, read by Chris Andrew Shula. So,
yeah,
not the Elliot Ackerman we're expecting.
No, and if you've read Elliot Ackerman's work before, and I have, he's a military veteran. He writes from that perspective, and he writes novels.
And 2 memoirs.
He's definitely covered more than just novels for sure. And he's written a couple memoirs. The book that I most recently read by him before this one was 2034, which is a speculative fiction, and it's deathly serious. It's a very serious book about the nature of global war or global military interconnectivity, however you want to describe it. And I enjoyed it, but I kept thinking, this is the kind of audiobook or kind of book this is the book that my dad would recommend to me. And I love my dad dearly. If he's listening, I appreciate that you're listening. My dad, for example, recommended to me Tom Clancy back in the 80s. And I read one of his recommendations. Tom Clancy, of course, is also a very detail-oriented author, and his books are very serious. So I was approaching this one with the same trepidation, like, here we go. We're going to have another story that's deeply rooted in military service. And it is. But what stands out for me and what took me off guard was the humor. This is a humorous book.
It's a comic novel, yeah. It's a caper. It's not a thriller.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. I would liken this to the movie Kelly's Heroes.
A movie I love.
Yes, me too. Once I clicked into the spirit, I realized, we're going on a much different adventure with Elliot Ackerman this time. So in this particular audiobook, you have 2 characters. They're both former military pilots, and nobody in this book uses their real name. That's sort of the theme of this, is that you have to have at least several names, and you never use your government name. So you have Big Cheese and you have Squirrel. Once you learn their names, that's all you need to know about them, except Big Cheese also has a family. And that's really important because there's a grounding in a kind of emotional reality here. I don't know if the word mercenaries is fair here, but they're working out to repossess a private jet. Yep. And honestly, I'm going to just say now, if you listen to this book, just go with it, because the details are there, but just you're going to enjoy the spirit of this book more than anything else. They repossess this jet. Things go wrong, and then they get embroiled in a global espionage ring filled with sketchy characters. I loved it. I didn't actually know all the time where we were or what was going on, but I really enjoyed the trip we were on, and it's really humorous. And at the same time, rooted in reality. The Russian-Ukrainian war is happening, so we are in present day with this story, but it is fictional.
And we hear a lot about Afghanis who worked with the Americans in
Absolutely.
great difficulty. Yeah, I agree. I said a caper, but there are truly dark moments, I think, in this book that are jolting. They pop up.
They do.
And then subside, and you're back in the caper again.
That's absolutely a great way of capturing what's happening here in the spirit of this experience. Still, I enjoyed it. I would recommend it.
Let's talk about Chris Shula before we
Yes, absolutely. Sorry about
listen to it. So, no, yeah. What did you think about his performance?
So I will say Chris Shula, who I've listened to other work by him. He's an actor. He pops up here and there for me. And he really just seems like he can convey the sort of male camaraderie of it all throughout the experience of listening to this book, but also knows timing. He understands timing and he understands the humor. He doesn't oversell. I mean, you can sometimes listen to books where the audio narrator might not necessarily fit with the humor and the pacing of the author. And in this instance, Shula really does that. He really does know what he's doing. And he really helps kind of make that, like I said, if you think about the movie Kelly's Heroes and the timing and the spirit of that, I think Shula gets it. And I think that he really sells this. He sounds like he's enjoying himself, which I always love that too. When you hear somebody who is performing, not just reciting the text, which is the worst kind of audiobook sometimes, but really selling it. And then this is what kind of allies it with a performance. So I want to recommend this book for his performance as well.
Yeah, he narrates with a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm.
I agree.
But at the same time, he's still in the spirit of the book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I completely agree.
So why don't we hear a little, set this up.
So this will set up with our main characters, Big Cheese and Squirrel, and they are waiting in darkness to seize this luxury jet.
All right. This is Sheepdogs by Elliot Ackerman, and it's narrated by Chris Andrew Shula.
He glanced through the darkness in the direction H had walked off, to where the airfield's arc lights glowed, casting a fringed halo above the treetops. H got you past that immigration officer, didn't he? Have a little faith. I never should have let you convince me. And Cheese bit off the end of his sentence. The problem he'd encountered at immigration coincided with the reason Squirrel had needed to do very little convincing to get Cheese to come on this trip. Cheese was a pilot. An Afghan pilot, no less. One who'd flown everything from Russian-made Mi-17s for the office to a private jet for President Ghani. For years, Cheese had imagined that if Kabul ever fell, he'd be able to fly himself, his young wife, and their extended family out with plenty of time, either on a helicopter or a jet. Cheese could fly anything.
He just handles this so well. You know, there are very unusual things that happen in this book. And I think Chris is just very straightforward in his narration of it.
There's something to be said about playing it straight, and he does, because a lot of what happens here is very outlandish, yet rooted in some type of reality. And I think that takes a lot of skill. So I tip my hat to his performance here, because it really did work for the book that we have here.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And now we're going to go in a completely different direction, aren't we?
Well, that's the spirit of this particular episode, I guess, is that these books are very disparate, but that's fine. You know, we're all about variety around here. This is Hologram Boyfriends. This is written and narrated by Mike Albo. Now, compared to Aviator and the Showman, this one's comparatively shorter. It's 6.25 hours. And also, it is an audio exclusive. So you're only going to find this in audio form.
No, I agree. It's an audio memoir. I don't see how this could be a print book.
No, it's really living in the media environment that you're experiencing it in. Now, Mike Albo, who I was familiar with, shares stories here about living in New York, where he works as a writer and an editor during the days when print media still dominated. I note that as I listened to this, I had to chuckle, because I'm sure I've encountered his writing in some of these print magazines back 25 or so years ago. He wrote for a magazine, for example, called Cargo, which was for younger men, I think, if I remember correctly. So I had to laugh, because I'm like, I remember that magazine. I remember them. I still actually read them. They still exist. I enjoy having, they still bring me some happiness. But to this, so you have Mike describing his life, navigating that world, working as a writer in New York, which fascinates me just as a setting. He describes how, as an open gay man, he is connecting and how technology over the last 25 years or so has really changed the dynamic of how you meet up with people, the hyperspeed of it all.
I agree. I thought it was very funny. I laughed out loud at points and really moving as well. He talks about his struggle as a stand-up comic, as a writer, trying to make a living in New York. And that bit where he talks about the money he owes for his schooling. Holy moly. It took my breath away.
Yeah.
But a lot of this book, I think, is examining both his quest for love/sex and the cost of living online.
I know we have a lot of different people out there, a lot of different work capturing or trying to capture the spirit of what happens in this modern era we live in, where a lot of our visage and our identity is wrapped up in that. And I think he just did a really effective job capturing that in this audiobook about what it actually meant. And like, to your point, what's the cost of it all? Thought that's a great way of describing it. So it's a short audiobook, but definitely worth it because it just takes you there. And he's such a good, he conveys this so well. And what's interesting about this book as well, and another reason why it took me off guard, audiobooks, you typically think of them as standard studio work. We're all over New York with him. He's talking to us directly. Then we're on stage with him.
As he performs.
As
he's performing his stand-up. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so you hear the audience applauding, and sometimes the laughs aren't there. I mean, it feels very real. And so it almost feels like you're kind of in this space in New York with him as he's moving around doing different things.
And I thought it worked really well. It wasn't confusing at all, or it didn't seem frantic at all.
No.
I thought it really wove together very, very well. I was there the whole way.
I found myself taking most of all of this audiobook in, and not exactly 1 6-hour setting, but very close to it, just because it kept me captured.
Me too. And I think we do need to say that there's a lot of sex in this book, mostly casual, but it runs through the book, not for any shock value, but because it's what he's grappling with. So definitely not a book to listen to in the car with the kiddies.
Good note for those of you considering this book. It's really good, but not necessarily for younger folks, for example, if you're going on vacation.
Yeah, for sure.
But I like your description that he does capture it, not to shock, but to just be honest. He's being straightforward about his experience, and that's what makes this book exceptional.
I agree. That's my note. It's honest because he's really exploring the questions that he's asking, and he's being honest about himself and saying, yeah, but I used to act that way before all this technology. I had that issue. Well, why don't we listen to it? So people will know what we're talking about.
I won't do much setup here just to say, but to give you a sense that this is his voice and it takes you from one place to another. So let's just go there.
This is Hologram Boyfriends. It's written and narrated by Mike Albo.
Why we don't say hi or even smile. As more and more apartments are being built in my neighborhood, more and more people are arriving. But are they really here? They look at their phones while they walk their dogs and don't smile or say hello when they pass by. They have no expressions on their faces. There's this couple on my floor who look through me when I see them. It irks me so much that I force them to say hello to me. Hi, good morning. What a nice day, right? Right? I turn into an aggressively friendly person, like someone from our town, but on meth. They will faintly smile and then ignore me again. Who are these people? Let me introduce you.
Hey, I'm Kyle with a K. I live in Williams Ridge, Woodswick. You see me rushing out of boutique fitness classes, walking into elevators in luxury apartment buildings and in the windows of restaurants that don't allow cash payments. You probably wonder what I do for a living to be 25 and able to afford to live in the city. I'm a UX director at the Sundance Starbucks Capri Sun Sunny Delight viral video project. I'm not looking up from my phone at you because I'm busy buying eye masks on Goop, shoes on Yoop, and Himalayan sea salt on Shoop.
To part one of that, I say, yes, 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 who are these people? And I love that bit, which goes on and gets funnier and funnier. It's a marvelous bit. And this excerpt shows that transition and how seamless it really is.
Right. I've listened to audiobooks where it does jump around a bit using some of these same elements. This is perhaps one of the best examples of how you can do this, how you can go from one space to another space in that soundscape, and it all works together. So I definitely want to recommend this one.
And I liked Albo's voice when he was doing straight up narration.
Yeah.
I liked his presentation and felt like he was talking to me.
that makes it, again, it goes back to that honesty, but also that intimacy throughout, that he's speaking to you, the listener. And it's a credit to his writing and his performance, and of course, his voice.
I agree. Well, 3, as you say, very disparate books.
Very disparate, but ones that all took me off guard, all that I'd like to recommend. And I really appreciated having a chance to talk about these with you today, Joe.
And I always appreciate having you on, Stephen, and I'll talk to you next month.
Wonderful. Talk to you next month, Joe.
Okay. You've been listening to Behind the Mic by Kirkus Reviews. Remember, Behind the Mic now drops on Thursdays, but if you follow us, we'll simply appear in your feed. And while you're at it, follow Fully Booked by Kirkus Reviews. Fully Booked is the podcast for book lovers. Every Tuesday, Kirkus editors and host Megan Labrise bring you author interviews, industry insights, and recommendations from the bestseller list. Find your next great book on Fully Booked by Kirkus Reviews. Follow Fully Booked and Behind the Mic on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or wherever you get your podcasts. And stop by kirkusreviews.com to check out reviews for both print and audiobooks. Behind the Mic is produced by Jessica Lockhart. Michelle Cobb, Stephen Cummings, Leslie Fine, Ellen Minskoff, Alex Ritchie, Laura Rossi, and Kendra Winchester are our contributors. Jennifer Dell is our editor, with assistance from Alicia Langerman. Tom Beard's the executive producer. The music is William Ross Chernoff's Nomads 4-Way. And I'm your host, Joe Reed. Good listening.